Nikki here with the Canton Museum of Art presenting Museum to Go Takeout. If you were with me last week, you know that we talked about lines and angles and where you can find certain types of lines and angles in some of the artwork from the exhibition Everyday People. This week we're going to delve a little bit deeper into lines and angles at the beginning by talking about the exhibition What's Your Angle that we had at the Canton Museum of Art. But we're also going to introduce a new topic today, and that topic is symmetry. Symmetry can be found all around us in nature, in the way that things are designed. It's the springtime, you might even hear birds chirping through my windows. All kinds of things are in bloom, so I feel like this is the perfect time to explore symmetry in our natural world and make art about it. First, we're going to dive into some art from What's Your Angle by an artist named Jimmy Ernst. Last week, we talked about geometry in artwork, and we talked about abstract art. Jimmy Ernst was a screen printer, and he made a lot of images that use lines and angles and also symmetry. So we're going to discuss that, and then we're going to move outside. Let's get started. Just to recap from last week, I wanted to go back over intersecting lines and parallel lines. Remember that intersecting lines are two lines that meet and cross each other at a single point. If you have two that meet at a right angle, those lines are called perpendicular. Parallel lines never intersect but run like railroad tracks next to one another. A vertex is a point where two lines' ends meet. Every angle has a vertex. A right angle looks like an L. An acute angle is smaller than an L, and an obtuse angle is larger than an L. An L meets at a 90-degree angle. When you look at these works of art coming up by Jimmy Ernst, and when you look at some of the images we're going to check out in nature, try to see if you see any lines or angles that we talked about. These two images are both untitled screen prints by the artist Jimmy Ernst from 1970. I think if you compare these to the geometric images that we made last week, you might see some similarities. I'm wondering if you see any lines or angles and where you might see them in these images. Also, we're going to dive into a concept called symmetry, and we'll discuss how these images look the same from side to side. Let's get started by looking at some lines that we've learned about in these images by Jimmy Ernst. You'll notice that I've marked some lines running through both of these images. In the image on the left, you can see parallel lines, and if you start to look around, you might see some other parallel lines in this image. The image on the right has perpendicular lines running through the center of the image. I also see some angles in here. You can see I've marked in green the areas in both images where there are obtuse angles. Look around and see if you see any other obtuse angles in this image. Do you see any acute angles? I know I do. I've marked the acute angles with red arrows to show where they are in the image. You might see some other acute angles in this image. Also, you'll start to notice that if you look from side to side, both sides of each of these pictures are the same. This concept is called symmetry. You can see where I've drawn the line down the center of each image that if you were to fold it over on itself, both sides of the image are exactly the same. Jimmy Ernst does this using geometry and using angles which draw the eye to the center of the piece and then back out again. Take a minute to look around you and see if you see anything in your world that has symmetry, that's the same from side to side, or that might even be the same up and down. Maybe it's the same all the way around. We're going to discuss some different types of symmetry. Here you can see illustrated with flowers all different types of symmetry. Asymmetrical compositions are ones that are not symmetrical, so they are not the same from side to side. The type of symmetry we talked about in Jimmy Ernst's work is bilateral symmetry. That means that something is symmetrical from side to side. So if you were to take a mirror and put it up to one side, you would see the image reflected and it would look exactly the same. There are other types of symmetry too. Bisymmetric symmetry is where the top and bottom and the side and the other side are all symmetrical. Radial symmetry, like you'll see in the flower toward the left, means that something is symmetrical all the way around. On the images on the bottom of this picture, you can see that there are different angles represented in different types of symmetry noted. You'll notice that every flower posted has a different type of symmetry, and that different type of symmetry has a different angle that goes with each segment. We're going to look at some pictures of some flowers in nature and talk about the different types of symmetry that we see. If you look at this image, you can see that there are lines going through every petal, and they seem to correspond to lines on the other side. We could look at this image and see that there are a lot of similarities between each petal, making it radially symmetrical. But with radial symmetry, you can also cut things into 4 pieces. That means that this image is symmetrical bisymmetrically also. As you can see, this next image has been broken up into different angles to show radial symmetry. But if you look at some of these lines, they go all the way across. You can see that you can split this flower from top to bottom or in all different directions, and it is symmetrical all the way around. We're going to work on a project where we discuss flowers and symmetry. We're going to draw our own symmetrical flowers. I can't wait to do this project, but really quickly I'd like to go back to that image by Jimmy Ernst and talk a little bit about monochromatic colors. You'll notice that I have zoomed in on the gray image by Jimmy Ernst. This image has many different tints and shades of gray. A tint is when you add white to a color. So say you added white to purple, you would get a lavender. It turns into a pastel. Shade is when you add black to a color. So if I added black to purple, it would turn to a really dark kind of plum color. I'm going to be working with violet today in my own drawing that I make, but you can work with any color you'd like. I'm excited to do this project with you. Let's see what's going to happen. Today, I'll be using charcoal, but you could use some sidewalk chalk in kind of a dark color. I would suggest maybe a green or a blue or a pink. And I will also be using a colored pencil, and I have a pencil sharpener just in case I need it. We're going to be making a monochromatic image. And like I said when we were looking at Jimmy Ernst's work, monochromatic is a color scheme in which the artist uses different tints and shades of a certain color. I'm going to be working with violet today because the violets are coming up in my yard, and I think that that's a nice springtime color. And I'm going to be working with this violet colored pencil to control how light and dark I make my image by how hard I press. We're going to be doing what's called an image transfer to make a symmetrical image. So I have this paper, and I just chose a piece of scrap paper I had laying around, actually from the project that we did with science. So if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. Comment below and let me know what your favorite one has been. What I'm going to do is I've just folded the paper, and I'm going to start drawing on just one side. And I'm going to draw a flower because I think that that sounds like a wonderful springtime thing to make. We've been talking about symmetry in flowers. We've been talking about lines and angles that you can find in nature. So I think that this is perfect. I'm going to start by taking my charcoal, or if you had sidewalk chalk, you could use that. And I'm just going to go right to the line that I made with my fold on my paper. I'm going to make some shapes that are kind of flowy and flowery, and I'm thinking of these as the petals for my flower. You could make pointier shapes if you wanted for pointier petals. Depending on what kind of flower you want to make, you could really make it look like one perfect side of a flower. But for the sake of what I'm doing here, I think that just making shapes will make it look just enough like a flower. What do you think that I'm going to do after I'm done drawing on this one side? Comment below and let me know. I know we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's always fun to guess what the next step is going to be. Sometimes I like to keep the next step a surprise because I think that that adds an element of joy and excitement to making art with someone. Just adding a couple more little shapes in here. Maybe we'll go here and here. Now, my hands are kind of messy, but that doesn't really matter. It's time to transfer this onto the other side. So what we're going to do is we're going to fold our paper back. We're going to make sure that these two lines touch. And then I'm going to just smooth it out to where the fold is. Make sure that the fold is really creased, all the while trying not to rub the two pieces of paper together too much. And then I'm going to go over it with the side of my colored pencil. I like to hold it really tight so that I can make sure that the paper isn't moving around too much underneath. I'm just going to lift it up quickly and see if anything transferred. I'll let you see that it has, but I'm going to lay it back down in exactly the same spot that it was, and I'm just going to go over it again, but with my hand this time. All right, let's open it up. So here we have a beautiful image of a flower. And I can choose to trace all of this with my charcoal. And if you have some charcoal, you can do that too. You can choose to trace with your sidewalk chalk, or maybe you're using charcoal from your grill, or maybe someone in your family had a good idea for what you could use. And I kind of messed up here. It's okay if you mess up a little bit, but the idea is for both sides to look the same. We're making a symmetrical image. And so that's why we want to make sure that our image really transfers well. Because in some places I'm having a little bit of a hard time seeing it. All right. Now charcoal can get pretty messy, but if you're using sidewalk chalk, it shouldn't be that messy. We have this beautiful flower here. I can turn it this way so you can see what it looks like. Ooh, this way it kind of looks like a heart. And sometimes in flowers we have little pollen pieces. So I could maybe add 2 over here, and then I would add 2 on the other side so that we could keep it symmetrical. Now I'm gonna start working in my monochromatic color scheme using my violet colored pencil. You can control how hard or how soft you color. I'm gonna start by coloring really soft. And then I'm gonna go to another petal and color a little bit harder. This way I can start to see the range of colors that my colored pencils make. You'll notice with charcoal it's kind of smudging everywhere. That's okay, because at the end I'm going to have us wipe down the whole picture, and the charcoal or the chalk or whatever you're using is going to smudge and create a really cool effect. So I'm just going to color with that same pressure on the other side, because remember, we want to keep our image symmetrical. Last week, maybe you decided to make a monochromatic image when you made your lines and angles geometric art piece. Let me know below what you decided to do last week when you were making work. So this one I pressed really hard, and you can see these are almost the same color, so that's something to keep in mind. Also, I'm using a watercolor colored pencil, so if I wanted to, I could go back in and add water and really make this pop. But I'm just going to use it like a regular colored pencil for now. We're all working with what we have at home, right? I know I am. So I'm just going to keep coloring different parts, different shades of violet, and I will work on making sure that the ones that don't connect are also the same color. Now, you could really color this in with anything that you want. You could color it with a colored pencil, you could color it with your crayons, like crayons we used last week. You could color this with markers if you have different tints and shades of the same marker. What I really like about this project is that you really have to look at exactly where you're coloring from side to side to make sure that you don't color in the wrong part. You can see that I am a bit further along now, and I'm still paying attention to how hard I'm pressing, and how hard I'm pressing relates to how hard I'm pressing on the other side. You can see that my image is really coming to life. Now I'm coloring really loosely. You can color nice and tight if you want to make sure that your strokes are really close together. Or you can color like me and just kind of color loosely. I kind of like the idea of coloring really loosely because you get to see the marks of what you colored. And that is called mark making in art. And everybody kind of has different opinions on how much mark making should exist in art. Some people like really photorealistic art that looks like somebody just painted or drew or printed a photo right on the page. And some people like when art is a little bit loose and free, maybe like an impressionist painting. Some people like to see art that is abstract and doesn't really have any sort of meaning behind it until maybe they look at what the artist was talking about on the didactic in the museum, and some people love to see, you know, just a beautiful flower. So art is different for everyone. That's part of what I love so much about it. I'm starting to notice that this area down here is a little bit darker than this one, so I'm just gonna color that in. All right, and that is a symmetrical drawing of a flower. What I'm gonna do next is I'm going to get a paper towel or a tissue or maybe some toilet paper, whatever you have on hand, maybe even another piece of scrap paper, and I'm just gonna rub the whole surface of this. What that's gonna do is it's going to distribute this charcoal around and kind of give it a cool, smoky effect. Now, if you were to do that with, say, your sidewalk chalk of a different color, then it would do the same thing. It would just kind of give a nice overlay of color. So I'm gonna go grab that paper towel and I'll be right back. I have my paper towel and I just kind of have it folded up however I want. And I'm gonna start by making tiny circles all around. It's gonna give it kind of a hazy, nice effect. That charcoal is mixing with my violet, and I think it looks pretty cool. Sometimes when you use pastels, you'll rub the pastels into the paper. But this is kind of softening all of the lines and just making this kind of smoky and dark. Say you're using a pink piece of sidewalk chalk for your lines. This could end up giving your flower a bunch of different colors, which could be fun and exciting. Also, when you're rubbing in the charcoal and you have something like colored pencil, which has made marks all over the paper, that charcoal kind of falls into where those marks were made and gives you kind of an interesting pattern that starts to form. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in with my colored pencil and I'm just gonna go back over those charcoal lines that we did at the beginning to give it a little bit of visual interest. And a little bit of a hand-drawn look. I like doing this because even though it gets harder and harder to keep the symmetry every time that you go back in with another material, it's kind of like a fun challenge to yourself, and it's also kind of fun to see how your image changes from beginning to end. Working with chalk or charcoal and colored pencils is called working with mixed media. And what you are doing right now is creating a mixed media piece of artwork. You could even go back in and use paint over this. You could go back in and collage maybe some parts in. I don't know. You can take this as far as you would like. Ugh, I knock down that pencil sharpener all the time. After I finish going over all of my charcoal lines with my colored pencil, I'm going to cut out my image of my violet that I made, and I'm going to paste it on another piece of paper. Stay tuned to see the final product. So here is my finished piece. I chose a warm brown for the background because it reminded me of the leaves that are still left over from fall and how all of the violets are just kind of popping up through the leaves in the little wooded area by my yard right now. Let me know in the comments below what color you chose for your background, if you chose to cut it out and make your own background, Or let me know some awesome things that happened while you were making this. To stay up to date with what we're doing at the Canton Museum of Art, make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to tag any art that you've done from Museum to Go Takeout with hashtag Museum to Go so that you can see work that other people have made under the same hashtag and you can be part of this awesome online community. Also, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Canton Museum of Art to stay up to date with everything happening at the Canton Museum of Art. We don't just offer Museum to Go Takeout for this time while you're at home. We also have segments on art for health and healing and our curator's couch. We have all kinds of studio tours with artists. So it's really great. We have some really great resources. I hope that you have a wonderful Wednesday, and I will look forward to seeing you next wonderful Wednesday. Bye.